Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for attending the Blockchain Global Conference, FinSum Blockchain and Business. It is now time to start today's session. Unconference for multi-stakeholder discussion from various angles. This Unconference will be facilitated by Community Accelerator and Head of Potage, Mr. Azu Kawahara. Now I would like to hand over the microphone to Mr. Kawahara.
Thank you very much. We will be conducting this panel in English, so for those of you who are in the hall, please, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, please be mindful.
BG2C Unconference. My name is Azu Kawahara, a facilitator of the session. Nice to meet you. Please let me introduce myself at first. I'm a community accelerator of Potage. I support community development of large corporations, local communities, and startups. I am very honored to be here as a coordinator of the great session. So here is the timetable of the session. We have 10 minutes introduction now, and then we will have 40 minutes meetings of 2 themes. Then we will have 10 minutes wrap up with 3 minutes presentations of each theme. What is Unconference? It is a participant-driven meetings with some stakeholders. Everybody can be a participant. There's no map, no order, but you can enjoy a discussion and interaction with great specialists of this field. Today, we have 2 themes to discuss. We have 2 tracks for each theme. Theme 1 is digital identity in financial services, and theme 2 is future of Bitcoin. Theme 1 track will have live streaming at the venue, and theme 2 track will be uploaded on YouTube later. On theme 1, we will have 2 guests on the track. Please welcome them. Mr. Brad Kapp from Institute of International Finance. Mr. Naohiro Fujie, co-chair of OpenID Foundation Japan. The track will include this agenda. How can we trust the digital identity compared to the traditional identity process? How to avoid fragmentation of identity information without sacrificing privacy. On theme 2, we have a guest on the track, Mr. Junpei Miwa from Kinyucho Financial Service Agency of Japan. Theme 2, we have this agenda, the necessity of price stabilization of Bitcoin and Bitcoin from various perspectives. Please have a pleasure to have an honest conversation of these questions with the specialists of each theme. And there's an announcement to audiences from YouTube. You can watch live streaming of Theme 1 on YouTube. But we're sorry, Theme 2 will be uploaded on YouTube later. Please enjoy the live streaming of main session, all right? And this is the 3 rules to make a great session. Every participant, please keep it in mind. Rule 1 is, please talk compact. Time is for everyone in the discussion. Rule 2, please use positive words. The unconference is to discuss the possibility of the future. Respect any opinion and love the diversity of the world. Rule 3 is keeping your time. Time flies. We have only 40 minutes to talk. Keep in mind the time every time, and my screen will be a countdown timer. So please check the time remaining every time, all right? Today, time for wrap-up is 9:50. Please decide presenters while you are meeting and the presenter will have 3-minute presentation for each theme. This is a wrap-up time. All right, so now is the time to start. Please move to the discussion, everybody. Have fun. Thank you. So everybody, please move to discussion for each theme. Please decide the moderator of each theme and please start a discussion. Any questions, guys?
Are we going to introduce ourselves first, or we can just start?
I get Twitter to introduce.
So we have to introduce our service first.
I guess so.
Yeah, yes, so too. So I got the first one. I'm now here Fujie from OpenID Foundation, and I'm a co-chair of EKYC and Identity Assurance Working Group, which is trying to define new spec of OpenID Connect, which is useful for identity proofing itself. So that's all. So, Brad?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Brad Carr. I'm the Managing Director of Digital Finance at the Institute of International Finance. We're a global institute. We have about 480 member firms around the world, across banks, insurers, asset managers, and pension funds and the like. So a pretty diverse representation, based in the Washington, D.C. area. And as a global body, I guess a number of the issues that we focus on have been around international connectivity, international consistency, and we're very grateful to the JFSA, who I think have been a great partner and a great leader in championing the causes of consistency and harmonisation internationally. And those are particularly important for subjects of innovation, in that in order to, in the nature of a globally connected world, a digitised world where borders are less prominent perhaps, it's very important that we have some international consistency in regulatory approaches and supervision, and I'm very grateful for the way that the JFSA has been a champion of that cause. Like Fuji-san, the IIF, we're very much supportive and helping to lead the Open Digital Trust Initiative, and it's been great to have the OpenID Foundation as a significant partner there. In the course of the conversation, I'd like to talk a little bit more about that initiative, where the OpenID Foundation is leading the technical stream, and my team at the IIF is leading the policy side in complement to that. But I'll pause for the moment and let others continue introductions, and we'll pick up all of that in a bit more detail a little later.
Thanks, Brad. So, who's next?
I suppose I go. Hello, everyone. Kengo Suzuki from Layer X. We do the blockchain kind of business, but currently I work on alternative asset built on top of enterprise assets, and in there I work as a security architect, and I hope I learn and contribute this meeting in some way. So nice to meet you guys.
Thanks, Kengo.
So can I introduce myself? Yeah, I'm Yusuke Ikeno from Georgetown University and Sumitomo Trust Banking. Now I am studying in Washington, D.C., and my research interest is the application of blockchain to financial industries. And since digital identity program is key for all business in banking businesses, So I'm excited to discuss about this topic here. Thank you.
Thanks. Who's next?
So can I? This is Akihide Higo from TrustLock. We're serving the both sides around the digital identity. I mean, the one side is the for the financial institutions or other companies. We are serving, we are helping the KYC and their KYC processes, and the other side we are serving to the general users about the digital identification application. And today, I'm happy to join here, and よろしくお願いします。
Hiba-san.
Shall I?
Yeah, please.
All right. My name is Mamoru Fujimoto from SBI. I have been the head of the blockchain since 2016. At the beginning, I explore the cryptocurrencies, but my current focus is primarily on the enterprise blockchain. And the identity is a very, very big issue and a pain point at this moment. I'm very happy to discuss this issue with you.
So, Natsan, you're the last person to this.
Right. So I'm Nat Sakimura, the chairman of the OpenID Foundation, author of OpenID Connect, and a bunch of specs working on ICE on privacy matters. Also, I'm really, like as Brad has introduced, IAF Foundation has a partnership with Advance in this front. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks. So, anyone else who is not introduce themselves? No? Okay. So, today's topic is about digital identity and financial services, and how to proceed. I have no idea that. But today we have Brad-san as a guest. So I propose that it's better for all of us to know about Digital Trust Initiative, which is operated by IAF, and its momentum today.
Sure. Well, actually, before we come to the initiative, I'd probably like to talk a little bit about the why this is important, and where I think the opportunities are. And the notes I had that I was given as a brief coming into today were very helpful in suggesting that I should talk about some of the benefits apart from AML and KYC. And I think there's a lot of really important commercial benefits that we should focus on. And firstly, I think purely from the perspective of banks and insurers and large financial institutions, incumbent financial institutions that are trying to preserve their position and their customer relationships in the new world. I think that the reality is that we're going to be in an economy where consumer finance globally is going to be largely conducted by platforms. I think pre-COVID, I probably would have said that we were 5 years from that. And because of COVID, I now think we're probably 2 years from that. There's been such an acceleration, the emphasis on e-commerce, the reality that the big tech firms are a bigger and more important part of our lives than they ever were previously. My family, we're completely dependent on Amazon. We've got packages coming every day. In the same way that Alibaba really had its first major emergence in the 2002 to 2004 SARS crisis, when Chinese consumers did not want to have to go and shop in person. And that really revolutionised a lot of how retail trade was done and how SMEs tried to sell their products. So I think we see a dramatic acceleration of that right at the moment, and we see other platforms like eBay, for instance, is one that was probably fading into the background a little bit behind some of the other big tech firms in the previous couple of years, but have already had a really significant resurgence in 2020. So I think that's the reality. People are going to be going to their platforms where they have their tech company relationships for more of their financial products. And that leaves a bank or an insurer with a choice of am I simply going to be a supplier of product that is sold on somebody else's platform? In which case you may still have a viable business, but you'll lose a lot of the margin and you'll lose the centrality of having and owning the customer relationship. Or as some banks are doing, try and get ahead of the game and be the platform. And Santander is one that has done a lot of work with that, as is BBVA. Those big Spanish banks are probably amongst the world leaders in being innovative in this particular space. Others in Europe, you see like Erste in Austria with their George platform, SEB in the Nordic countries with their open API initiatives. And those firms are saying, look, we want to be the platform, we want to have the customer relationship, and we'll let others come and sell their products on our platform. But that's how we want to position ourselves in the new world in the digital economy. And I think strategically that makes a lot of sense, but it only works if you can do digital identity. If you can't do digital identity, you're not going to be the platform. Somebody else is, and you're going to have a greater dependence on that other player. So I think there's firstly a really big picture strategic consideration there for banks and for insurers and for other firms as to why digital identity is commercially important to their strategic direction. The other one I want to put alongside that is about the SME customers. And the reality of this e-commerce world, this increasingly digitised or Alibaba-ified or Amazon-ified world that we have is small businesses around the world are having to rapidly reinvent themselves. We're not going and shopping in physical shops anymore. The death of bricks and mortar retail that's been foreshadowed for many years and has been reflected somewhat in commercial property values over the last 10 years has suddenly really accelerated, really gathered pace. I'm not spending money in the coffee shop anymore, but I've got an Amazon parcel coming to the house every day. I'm buying my beer from a local craft brewery that now delivers to me. This is the new world, and you saw that in countries, certainly in the US, where March was the first period where we started to have this kind of soft quasi-lockdown, if you like. A number of these businesses were stranded or coming up with somewhat inventive approaches to try and convert themselves into e-commerce businesses. And maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, they caught on and they were using businesses like Square, for instance, as a platform. There is this massive urgent reinvention of SMEs as e-commerce firms that's occurring. And for some products, and craft beer is one example, I can't just pay, I need to show that I'm eligible to buy, that I'm over a certain age. In other businesses, and one of the early prototypes for the Open Digital Trust Initiative was the United Kingdom's lotteries, where to buy a lottery ticket online, you need to demonstrate that you're above a certain age and that you're a UK resident. So these small businesses trying to reinvent themselves need to be able to verify that their potential customer is an eligible potential customer in terms of legal restrictions and the like. But they don't want to have to go and manually check identification every time. Just because we're not doing in-person sales, we're not doing in-person identification, but we still need to do that identification. And I apologise, I'm going to repeat something I said in yesterday's conference session. That small business doesn't want to have to retain every single piece of personal data about the people they're transacting with, because then you've got to protect that data, you've got to secure it. And under legislation like GDPR in Europe, you've got massive fines as well as the reputational risk if you can't do that. It's so much better if those small businesses can have a bank provide the identification service for them. And when they need, they can connect to the bank. And the bank doesn't need to say, here's the customer's date of birth. The bank needs to say yes or no. This person is eligible to make this kind of transaction. So I think if I link together a few things there, I think digital identity is critical for the strategic direction for banks. But I think it's also really critical as a function and as a service that the banks can provide, in particular to their small business customers, one that their small business customers so desperately need right at the moment. And lastly, it's also a function that banks are actually quite good at. And if I draw back to about a year ago, the Bank of England published their Future of Finance report, led by Hugh Van Steenis, who was at the Bank of England and is now at UBS. And it's an excellent report. But within it, there's one particular chart where people were surveyed, who do you most trust with your personal data? And 86% of people said their bank. And the other 14 were a smattering of their energy retailer, their social media company, other technology companies and the like. banks are overwhelmingly trusted by consumers with their personal data, and that's a great asset. It's an asset that the banks must not squander, and they must continue to protect and secure and use data ethically. But it is an opportunity that they can leverage and ensure their part to continue to participate in the new economy. So, Fuji-san, I would like to come and talk a bit more about the Open Digital Trust Initiative and some of the momentum and the opportunities we have. But I just wanted to give that, I guess, as a bit of an opening context, I think, as to why this is important and why it's an area of, I think, significant commercial opportunity, important for banks, important for small businesses, in addition to the anti-money laundering area that often the conversation gravitates to.
Yeah, could I ask some questions, Brad?
Please.
Well, you are primarily talking about the private platform of identity, but I'm very curious what, on your end, how the government plays. I mean, it's a national identity aspect, because it's so fragmented here in Japan, and I'm very curious. And you said that many people, 80% people believe banks, and I'm very curious how many people believe in government in terms of keeping identity.
It's a really good question, and I suspect it differs a lot from jurisdiction to jurisdiction based on culture and history. And indeed, there's a great report that Oliver Wyman published recently where they surveyed people across, I think it was 6 countries in the first edition and then 7 in the second. And they looked at the US and Germany and France and Spain and Singapore and Australia. And I think they might have included Japan in second iteration. But they did this, two surveys during the COVID period. And it was about the willingness of citizens to share their personal data, their health data, and scenarios of who they would share that with, such as government, and also whether they would share it for the motive of just in order to help a medical practitioner give better treatment back to themselves, or whether they would share it for the greater good of society as a whole, which obviously links into things like contact tracing applications and that I think are important to reopening. And there's a lot of significant discrepancies across jurisdictions where people are or are not more willing, and also where they are or are not more trusting of their governments. I think in general, historically, in developed economies, there's generally been reasonably good trust towards governments on identification. And I think that is a bit under threat right at the moment with some of the geopolitical developments we see around the world. I think the confidence in institutions, I've got to be careful I don't get myself into really controversial ground here in the US, but I think certainly the confidence in institutions has been rocked here in the US for a number of reasons. So I think the trust and confidence in government institutions as sources of IDs is probably the strongest right now today. I'm not sure if it necessarily still will be in another 5 or 10 years if we're continue on the current trajectory.
Well, actually, the reason why is that I believe that most of the people take it for granted, giving the private information to the government bodies. Actually, I would say I have 5, 6 national or pseudo-national IDs, driver's license, passport, health insurance, pension fund, registration, or my number, that's a tax related. So all of those government or pseudo-government body who actually number us, and they collect privacy information.
Yes.
But they are all fragmented, and people took it for granted. But people are very, very concerned about the private platform. But we also need to concern about the public platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, you're right, people, if you're asked for the information by a government agency, you willingly handed it over. And I think you willingly did with your bank as well. If you think of the information you had to provide when opening an account or when seeking a loan or when opening an insurance policy, I think historically those things were equally taken for granted. And I think there is an increasing degree of scepticism writ large, perhaps prompted by some of Facebook's previous events. I think it was well surmised when there were the congressional hearings here in Washington about Libra last year, and so many of the questions being put were actually not about Libra, but they were about some of Facebook's perceived misdeeds in protecting privacy previously. that has probably driven an awakening of a lot of consumers around the world. But I do stress coming from different bases, and in Europe you have a perception that, well, it's enshrined in law that privacy is a fundamental human right. And so if you take that question that Oliver Wyman were testing in terms of COVID, of the primacy of the individual's privacy versus the greater good of society, I think you see very different values placed on that in Europe to what you do in parts of Asia Pacific, for instance. You see, so I think you have a very different starting point, but all at different points on that same trajectory, I think, of questioning whether or not their data is being having its privacy sufficiently respected.
Yeah, that's right. Well, actually, my point is that I'm not just complaining, but I see the big opportunity to reduce the social cost by interconnecting those information in limited use. I mean that the privacy has to be protected, but interconnection of those siloed identity information will be beneficial not only to the individual but also the society as a whole. So.
Absolutely, I totally agree, and I think. And Sakamura-san or Fuji-san, you may want to jump in here from an OpenID Foundation perspective as well. But one of the things that we've been very focused on is about interoperability with other systems. That, you know, I think there's limited merit in trying to develop one central whole new identity system. And you need to be conscious that there are some countries that have actually made a lot of progress on this in their own ways. You know, Estonia has probably led the way in a blockchain environment, having so many of their different government agencies come onto a single platform, so that, as their president put it, you don't have the health department and the motor license vehicle department each asking you for the same bits of information, but all of that is centrally done. You have Singapore, I think, being a leader in the development of a national KYC utility. You have Sweden doing something similar to that. Canada has a quite developed national identity system that the government agencies and the banks participate in, albeit it has some variations across the systems of their 10 different provinces and 2 territories. So you have some of these examples where, you know, there has been considerable progress made within the system of one country. And one of the key focus areas that we have with Open Digital Trust is to be able to be interoperable and linked to those things, not to try and replace them, not to try and compete with them, but firstly to be able to bring the cross-border element. And I think this is where you see firms like Santander and HSBC that have such a passionate need, where they support a lot of expatriates and a lot of exporters. But you also have, you know, some countries that do not have those strong national systems or have their own fragmented systems. So to the extent that we can be helping to provide linkages and make those interoperabilities, that's really where I think the key focus will be going forward. But I mean, Sakamura-san or Fuji-san, you may want to either nuance that or correct that or elaborate.
Yeah, okay, Natsan. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, you know, I thought you were going to go first, but my short comment is that you know, there are a whole slew of attributes beside the basic identification attributes like name, address, and so on. And there are lots of potential to the use of these attributes as well. But to make full use of it, we actually have to have an interoperable, machine-readable technology and standard. And that's what we're working on at the Foundation and IAF in conjunction with Technical Street.
Thank you.
You may want to talk about the KYC work.
Yeah, actually, KYC and the IDA spec for OpenID Connect is a quite new spec for, especially for interoperability, and it might be we try to make it standards so that any service provider or identity provider can use it easier. And I'd like to some questions to all participants, but I have one question in my mind for a long time, which is better for financial institutes or service provider to use verified claims or verifiable claim. In terms of blockchain, because this is a blockchain conference, so they're trying to use the word verifiable credentials so that service provider or application can verify them attributes by themselves. But our approach in OpenID Foundation is provide verified information to service providers. This is quite similar, but there's some difference between these two approaches, I guess. So anyone in this conference have any opinion or comments about that?
Can I speak a little bit?
Please.
Thank you. Ideally, verified credential could be better because it reduces the total amount of cost after receiving the credential. But in reality, I don't think FSA or even the law is, I'm not exactly sure, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the regulator is approving for the verified credential. I think they are requiring the financial institution to verify and record for individual organizations. So at this point, it's we have to stand for the verifiable credential, but yes, I don't know if FSA and other regulatory approves the already verified credential, then that would be really ideal form of the KYC in the future.
Oh, thanks. I'd like to have comments from Higo-san because Higo-san work for KYC company. Higo-san, you are muted, I guess.
I'm sorry. I think for all the stakeholders, verifiable information is better, I think. Because when if to manage the verified information means it's the same as became the data controller, but in this conference, the theme of conference, the identify can be self-sovereign and identity. It's possible. So how can I say?
So you try to say that self-sovereign in terms of self-sovereignty, the verified or not verifiable is quite important, I guess.
Hi. Yes. verifiable is and of course someone can give certified to the information. Of course, I think there is some sorry, I can explain.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think there is certain kind of nuances between the verified claims and verifiable claims. Whether it's verified or not, the receiving party actually, or relying party actually has to verify that it came from the trusted source anyway. So in that sense, it's always going to be verifiable. It always has to be verifiable in some form or manner. At the same time, in many cases, like Brad talked about a few minutes ago, that the receiving end may not want to get to the raw data, right? So you might just want to get the yes or no on certain kind of attributes claims. So there are nuances, right? Depending on the use cases, sometimes you have to get to the raw documents or raw material, raw proofs or evidence, and sometimes you just need yes or no, true or false kind of statement from a trusted source. So that's physics. But for the later case, the claim actually has to be verified by the trusted source, and also the right party actually have to be able to verify that it came from the trusted source. So that's my take. So it's actually not verified or verifiable.
If I can add to that, I think another consideration you need to have in mind too is, where is the liability if this goes wrong? What if somebody is wrongly verified? And that's a piece that is part of one of our work streams. We're working through that at the moment. But it may also be an area where it creates a market and an opportunity for new insurance products. It's one thing for the local craft beer supplier or the local lotteries place to be given wrong advice as to somebody's date of birth. But what if it's somebody making a transaction to buy a house, and you have a $1 million transaction, let's say, and as you're executing the transfer, if there's something that's incorrect in that, then there's a lot more at stake. You may well end up with a scenario where the bank, let's say, the firm that is providing the identity within this network, is able to say, here is the basis of the normal response that we give and liability treatments under this XYZ. Or alternatively, you can pay a fee here and be insured for the particular outcome that you're wanting. You may end up that's one scenario that I know some firms are considering. But it is really important to consider that liability question of, if this is wrong, if the wrong information is provided through this network, who does that sit with? So we have, and if I segue a little there to talk a bit about the Open ID, Open Digital Trust Initiative. So we have, with the Open ID Foundation leading the technical work stream and the IAF leading the policy work stream. Within that policy work stream, we have 4 working groups dealing to firstly, customer centricity, secondly, interoperability, thirdly, the role of governments and the intersection with government agencies, and fourthly, this particular question of the legal liability. Because I think that's just a really important one we need to be clear on. And it's also important beyond some of these commercial scenarios that I'm talking about, but also into the AML and KYC space. It's both on both sides of the coin. The risk that somebody is wrongly verified under KYC, and if that is passed to another party and another party wrongly allows that entity to conduct business on the basis of somebody else's incorrect assessment. But equally, what if somebody is wrongly denied and they are essentially shut out of a particular area of services because somebody has wrongly rejected their KYC? These are both really critical questions, and we can't allow those to be showstoppers because we need to progress and develop in this space, but they are really critical questions that we need to face.
Yeah, it's very important to consider about small businesses rapidly go online, as Basan said earlier. There are cases. There are not all of them financial institute, or they have no less requirement for trust, something like that. So it's true that it's rely on use case. I think. Okay, so.
Well, can I ask one question to everyone? It seems that the people trust banks so much because they are so highly regulated. They are disciplined, it seems. So if that is the case, they can be the potentially the certificate agent for those who want to be certified or verify identity. So of course the government is the primary body, but alternatively, banks can be certificate agent for SMEs, especially because they have to identify themselves as themselves. So what other people think?
That's certainly true, I think.
I agree.
And also, banks can actually additionally provide trustworthiness as far as the payment ability is concerned, which is not there from the government. So it's a very, very important information that helps SMEs.
I understand.
Please go ahead. No, please, please go ahead.
Thank you. I understand the bank could be the source of trust, but at the same time, they are putting their own budget and cost to maintain that level of services. So it could be, there should be something they get as a reward by providing their let's say verified credential at some level. Without that, maybe bank could be not motivated to provide their own processes or data that is well regulated at some point. That's my opinion.
I think you make a really good point, and it's that the economics of this need to hold up. Absolutely. So if I go back to Fujimoto's point, I think banks are more trusted for two reasons, and one of them is exactly what you mentioned, that they are regulated and they have a risk-conscious culture, in part because they see the need to continue to maintain and value the trust of their customers, and in part because regulation and supervision help to ensure that. So absolutely, that's a big part of how we've got to be where we are today. And probably the other part I'd put alongside it as another reason, and I'm going to cite here Jaco Grobler, who's the Chief Risk Officer of First Rand Bank in South Africa. And he spoke on one of our webinars a few weeks ago, and he made a great point. He also wrote a terrific book I really recommend called Here Comes a Big Paradigm Shift. And amazingly, he published this book in January or February, and he pretty much mapped out a lot of what's happening in the world right now. You know, he anticipated that there would be a catalyst event at some stage. He didn't necessarily expect that it would be COVID-19 and that it would happen so soon, but so much of what he's predicted is bearing out already. And the point he makes is that banks have this position of being more trusted, more valued in the way that they protect data. And he sees it as being in part because of the existing business model, that banks haven't monetized customer data, but they've used customer data as a means to enable them to conduct business in the form of other products and services, and obviously to have the revenue generation models that are attached to those products and services. But they haven't needed to monetize the data in its purest form in a way that technology companies like Google need to do as a basis for their advertising revenue. Now, that's, I think, a really interesting and astute observation from him, and I think it sits alongside Fujimoto-san's point as how we've got to where we are now. But there's a question of, so what happens next? And is that position maintained? And do banks continue to protect data and use it in ancillary ways per the existing business model? Or do they at some stage feel compelled that they need to monetize the data to keep pace with the likes of a Google or an Amazon as they start pushing more into financial services? That's a really good question. And I think where the Open Digital Trust Initiative offers an opportunity is by continuing to protect data in a sound and secure fashion, leveraging the capability to provide an identity service. And I think you need to be able to monetize that identity service somewhere. And maybe the value is that it becomes an important part of the customer relationship and the customer centricity and keeps the bank at the centre of the customer relationship. Or maybe it actually becomes a fee-for-service identity check. And maybe that's where those insurance product ideas come through, that, okay, we can validate that this particular customer or particular payee of yours is who they say they are and they meet these criteria. And to ensure that we take any legal liability for that, it's going to cost you $2. That may be a model that emerges. So I'm speculating a bit in terms of different firms' own individual business plans. And the Open ID and the Open Digital Trust Initiative is about having something that is open source that everybody can access. So firms may decide to access and plug into that with different business model ideas to each other. We're all agnostic as to how that is applied. But Suzuki-san, your underlying point is absolutely right, that there needs to be in some way a business model that is viable and ensures that banks or insurers or other firms are indeed remunerated for good work they're doing in protecting identity.
So we have only 3.5 minutes left. So Ikeno-san, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I also think that banks can be some trust to give up for such digital entities, but for cases for some regulatory purposes such as KYC or so, I think that that trust should be supported by the governance. So I think it is required to be verified information. But it comes to some for supporting small businesses or some promoting businesses, it is good to use some verifiable information, which is managed by their users. And I think my opinion would be almost same direction with participants. Yes, sorry, I don't have enough time, so sorry, that's all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we have 2 minutes left. So we have to do two things. First one is decide who is a presenter to be a presenter after this discussion. And the second one is summarize this discussion. It's been quite difficult, I think. So, anyone in this room want to be a presenter?
Maybe Brad can do it.
Yeah.
Can I just make one comment before closing?
Yeah, please.
Actually, it was said that the self-sovereign identity is the way to go. I believe it's the ideal way, but especially to the individual, it's a big burden to control their own identity. Most of the consumers are not that kind of tech savvy as you are. So it's not that easy to control their private information by themselves. So that is also an issue we have to tackle. It's not just a technology issue, but also the awareness issue, I guess. but it can be done for the SMEs or the enterprise arena. So we may start from the enterprise. Then if people start grow or younger generation start grow, then we may the people may accept the self-sovereign identity in the future. But to my view, it's still too early. Maybe 2 years later, I'm wrong.
Yeah, I guess there's some need for custodian and that's that for enabling a self-sovereign identity for all people. So we have 5 seconds left. So Simon-san proposed that Brad is the best person to present to Broad. Is it okay for you, Brad-san?
Look, I can do that. I hope I can do justice to everybody's points. But yes, I can give that a go.
Oh, Kawahara-san was back. It's difficult to summarize, but
sure. Do you want me to?
Please do the closing speech.
Sure. Well, thank you to all of my esteemed colleagues for a great discussion. I probably feel like I did too much of the talking, so excuse the fact that I'm probably going to be a little bit repetitive, and I hope that's not a burden. We talked a lot to begin about the benefits of digital identity solutions beyond just the KML, the KYC and AML applications, and some of the opportunities specifically where there are commercial benefits, and part of that is for financial institutions to keep themselves at the centre of a customer relationship as we move into an increasingly digitised world where more of consumer finance is done on platforms, but also particularly where we're in an environment now because of COVID where so many small businesses around the world are urgently and dramatically reinventing themselves as e-commerce businesses, that they're not doing in-person sales and therefore they're not doing in-person identification. And for a number of products and services, you need to be able to identify that a customer is an eligible customer above a certain age or of a certain location, residential location, for instance. So there's a real need, an urgent need for identity services that small businesses can access, but to help them with that urgent reinvention, and ones that are not burdensome for them in having to secure and protect individual customer data that comes with a great legal peril with it if it's not adequately secured, as well as the reputational risk. So there's a great need and a great opportunity for financial institutions to play a role in a new identity ecosystem. And the financial institutions particularly are well placed to do that because of the fact that they have a great history of being well regarded and well trusted in the way that they protect customer data. This is merely an opportunity to leverage that strength in a new commercial orientation that fits with the new economy. At the same time, we talked a bit about the differences between and the relative merits of verified and verifiable identification and some of the legal liability questions that can arise where incorrect identity is passed through one of these networks. Both for some of the commercial purposes I talked about, but also for if the wrong AML identification is passed, either for a false negative or a false positive. We also talked about the ongoing role for government as an identifier, the reliance on government-sourced identity, and where when I talk about bank identification, a lot of that is underpinned by having provided a driver's license or a birth certificate at some stage in history to the bank. But also the role of self-sovereign identification, and perhaps the view that there's only maybe a relatively small portion of the population who are ready to be a self-sovereign identity that is appropriately secured at the moment. Maybe that's something that's going to evolve further in the future. It's part of this question of interoperability, and with the Open Digital Trust Initiative that the IIF and the OpenID Foundation are collaborating on, we very much emphasise interoperability and the connections to other sources and existing systems, and how that connects both with government identity and with some of these self-sovereign initiatives is a really key part of that. So I think that's hopefully a reasonably succinct and hopefully accurate summary of our conversation. I'll pause there if it's okay.
It's a perfect summary.
Too kind, thank you.
Thank you. So we're back to Kawahara-san. Kawahara-san, maybe you are muted.
Cannot hear you. Any problem on the mic?
Okay, I'm come back. Sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah. Silence facilitator. Okay, so now we're just waiting for the second presenter from SIM2. And maybe the discussion was heated up. Oh, Matsuo-san has come, right? Matsuo-san. You're going to be a presenter of SIM2, right?
So the first session ended. Shall I drop off or?
So I believe that it's a main channel. So the session for the Bitcoin core developers ended. So I was asked to join to the main channel.
Oh. Do you know who's going to be a presenter?
I think it could be Kevin Newman.
Kevin has not come. Lost his way. Oh, Kevin has come. Kevin, can you hear me, Kevin? Oh.
So I participated only on the first topic. Thank you very much. Very nice to talking to you all. I'm drop off. Thank you.
Thank you, Fujimoto-san. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, So, Kevin, could you be a presenter of SIM2 to have a wrap up? Oh, Hang. Oh. This is new normal, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we have only 2 minutes left, so how we can manage that? Kevin, you can join by sound only, or any idea to wrap up, Matsuo-san? Oh.
Okay, I will give a brief summary of that group. Can I got it now?
Yes, could you start?
Okay, so in that session of the Bitcoin community, so we discuss about the sustainability of the community itself, because that currently the reward of the Bitcoin is provided to only miners, but so we need to have that new ecosystem support Bitcoin code developer forever, because we need to maintain that secure software. So the other thing is so how we have that scalability for from the technical point of view and the application point of view. And of course, we need to have that good solution to reach out so expanded application of the Bitcoin. But so layer 2 technology or Lightning Network or other things is that's a potential technology and idea to expand application or Bitcoin for larger scale of applications. So this is what is discussed.
Okay, Kevin came back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Could you add some comments for the Matsuo-san's summary? Any other adding notice or something?
But just to, I first of all, also had the right platform for understanding, regulatory side. I do think we just need to be careful about the idea that Bitcoin as a transaction is going to be a concern. So I'm not worried about the technical development of Bitcoin, but having a better, regulatory environment, for transactions for all digital currencies. And I think, Professor Matsuo had a very good input there, and it was a very good discussion. Very good discussion.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. So it is a time to close. Yeah, it was a great achievement for BG2C. Actually, this is a challenging session, right? So this is the new normal, completely virtual and coming together from all over the world and communication by real time. Yeah, it was a great opportunity to share their knowledge, background, and so on. Anyway, so I'm to be honored to join the session, and please give yourself a round of applause. Actually, you have a great achievement and well done. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
We thank all the participants.
BG2C, okay?
We thank all the participants for your attendance in this session. 皆さんご参加いただいてありがとうございました。ありがとうございます。
Once again, thank you very much to the participants. Thank you very much to the facilitator, Mr. Kawahara.
This concludes the session. これをもちまして自由参加型セッションに
This concludes the session, Unconference for multi-stakeholder discussion from various angles. The next session will start from 10:20 in Hall B, panel discussion, balancing confidentiality and auditability. Those of you listening online, please select the relevant URL. We will be starting at 10:20. Thank you very much.